Welcome to the Spider Cellar. I'm Shayla, and I build and design miniature worlds. Welcome to the final part of this two-part series, in which I'm building the Battle of ENDOR. Last week, I completed the full kit build of Bandai's 1/48th scale ATST, and today, it's time to build that iconic scene from Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. To start, I'm making the base of the diorama out of XPS foam, and then I'm going to cover it up with a mixture of peat moss, a little bit of paint, and Sculptamold. The varied texture of the peat moss is great for replicating the forest floor, but proved a bit difficult to mix with the Sculptamold, as it quickly started to dry and crumble. I realized I probably should have covered the foam in just Sculptamold first, before sprinkling the peat moss over a layer of modeling paste or something. But hey, I made it work. With a coating of scenic cement, a layer of peat moss, then another finishing coat of scenic cement, the dirt is now sealed. Next, I'm making the ground cover, or ivy, out of polyfiber and some fake leaves. I'll start by painting the polyfiber brown, just so it blends in with the dirt better. And I realized these fake leaves are a little bigger than the scale I'm working with, so I'm just going to take my scissors and start chopping them up. Using more scenic cement, I'm lightly coating the stretched out polyfiber and adding all the little leaves onto it. But I'll need a lot more than just one patch of ivy, so I'm following the same method for the next 4 here. As you can see, upon sprinkling the leaves, I'm lightly shaking the whole patch back over the leaf pile, so those that didn't stick right away can be reapplied. That way, nothing is wasted. Okay, I'm using toilet paper rolls as placeholders for giant redwood trees, but only because I was having a hard time envisioning where the ivy should go. Ultimately, I want to use the ground cover to frame the main subjects in the scene, but I also know that ivy likes to climb, so knowing where the main trees are is a huge help in placement and overall design of the scene. I have a pretty good idea in my mind of where I want the ferns and the ATST to go, but I haven't quite determined where I want the Ewoks to be hiding. I definitely want to show them taking down the ATST, but at this point, I need to gather a bit more perspective first, and then just feel out placement as I go. And with that, I'm moving on to the ferns for now. If you've watched my Skyrim Ratway build, you may recognize these little plastic palm trees that I used for ferns in that video. This time, however, I decided to do things slightly different. Instead of just using the tops as ferns themselves, I've cut off each individual frond and am gluing them down separately to give a bit more control over the shape of each fern. And I realize this looks pretty sparse as it is, but I really need to skip ahead to the trees for now, and then I'll come back to putting in more ferns and ivy. So I'm starting with the giant redwood trees. In the densely layered redwood forest where they filmed the Battle of ENDOR, the trees are ominously huge, and have this otherworldly way of making a person feel so small and isolated. I wanted to capture that by just ending the trees after a certain height, not putting a point on the top or even any branches, so the mind can fill in the blanks of how tall the trees really are in comparison to everything else in the diorama. Using my favorite technique, I'm carving bark lines into the 2-part epoxy putty I've covered the shape with. I want to really dig into the bark here and create deep impressions and thicker spaces between lines, so the details are larger and make the tree look larger as well. The first layer of wash is going to massively help with the overall effect I'm going for. the wash is able to break the surface tension and run off into the lines I've created, where it will fill in shadows and create depth. I'm following that up with some highlights, and then I will carefully add in some more color. Redwood trees really do have a reddish quality to their wood, and I want to showcase that here. I'm going a little brighter at first because I have more layers of wash and highlights to apply. The more layers I create, the more realistic this will start to look. But in order to ensure the red stands out, I need to make it, well, stand out. Now, as I'm adding another wash, I'm using a thinner brush to apply the paint directly into the creases. And I couldn't resist this yellow-green wash, as it's excellent for creating the illusion of moss. I wanted a variety of trees, so I'm boldly trying a brand new, to me, technique for evergreen trees. Using some balsa wood strips, I whittled them down to a point, painted them light gray, and I'm now applying a little bit of moss flocking. Then, using some dried cuttings of an asparagus fern, I'm going to attempt to transfer some of this plant onto the artificial trunk to create branches. This ended up looking great, but it sure took a while to make, and my patience was heavily tested throughout the process. 10 out of 10 would try again, and 10 out of 10 will be frustrated again, but that's kind of how this hobby goes sometimes. Here, I'm applying a bit of watered-down PVA glue, and I'm sprinkling a mix of static grass, moss flocking, and asparagus fern needles over the current branches, just to give them a bit more density. And it's Ewok time! I love Ewoks, and I don't care, so let's talk about them. 4 years after Luke Skywalker blew up the Death Star, the Empire used the forest moon of Endor as a staging ground to build a new Death Star. The Empire knew what this meant for the Ewoks, and significantly underestimated the little moon bears, believing them too primitive of life forms to be of any threat to their plan. But the Ewoks are smart. They observed the ATSTs, determined their weak points, then took to planning and building all kinds of traps that ultimately stopped the Scoutwalkers in their tracks. So maybe give these little war heroes some credit? Now, to glue everything in place. As you can see, I added more ferns and ivy, and there are even more on the way. I wanted some of the ivy to climb up the base of the redwood trunks, as it does, and this time I'm using straight PVA glue because it's, well, better. It really wasn't until I glued the trees down that I decided how I wanted to arrange the Ewoks. Using craft wire, I then set up the rope that they used to trip the ATST and bring it to the ground. In the words of Admiral Akbar, today is a day of celebration. We have triumphed over villainy and oppression, and have given our alliance, and the galaxy beyond it, a chance to breathe and cheer for the progress in reclaiming our freedom from an empire that robbed us of it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what you want to see me build next time. Until then, bye!